It was the day of our wedding, and I had been nervous all day long. The time to walk down the aisle drew near, and I felt a rush of nervousness run through me. But I was not going to let that stop my wedding day. I was in the bridal chamber with Impa and Princess Zelda. As Impa and Princess Zelda worked on my hair, I stared down at my dress, fingering with the lacy design at my waist. The dress was the most beautiful and the most expensive I had ever seen. The king had spared no expense when he had it made. The top of the dress was a low V-cut with lace that crisscrossed in front of my breasts to hold them up, and a feathery lace design lined the edges. Interwoven in the lace was an intricate design of pearls, and at the very center was a gold Triforce design. The lace design V at the waist and a different lace pattern started where the other left off. The other pattern was all of the Triforce design! Smaller gold Triforce symbols lined the bottom of the dress. The sleeves were a see-through lace that ran from mid-arm all the way down to my wrist and attached at my middle finger. My veil had a full pearl design at the front, and small solid white Triforce designs lines the edges. After I was fully dressed, all that was left to do was finish my hair. Impa stopped working on my hair and let Zelda finish it. She walked over to a table and picked something up. When she came back over, she handed me a gold choker that had a Triforce charm, with a diamond dangling in the center. I looked up at Impa while I fingered it. It was very beautiful. I started to say something, but Impa interrupted me. "It will look beautiful on you." She took it, and the shaker smiled as she fastened it around my neck. Then I smiled back at her. "Thank you, Impa! It's very beautiful." Just then, Princess Zelda said she was done with my hair. I walked over to a mirror to take a look. The sides of my hair were done into a halo braid. The back of my hair was done up into 4 smaller braids that looped up and attached to the back of the halo braid. A silvery lace ran from the front of my hair to the back of my head and then around the 4 smaller braids. As I touched my hair with my hand, I turned to look at Princess Zelda and smiled at her. "Thank you so much, I just love it," I cooed as she smiled back. As Princess Zelda looked me over, she said something was missing. After thinking for a bit, she turned and walked over to her vanity and opened up a small jewelry box. She picked up something out of it, closed the jewelry box lid, and walked back over to me. Taking my left hand, she held up my hand and fastened a beautiful gold bracelet around my wrist. Looking at it, I could tell it was real expensive. The bracelet was of pure, solid gold. At the center was a Triforce charm. Diamonds lined the edges of the bracelet and rubies lined the inner part. At the center of the Triforce charm was an emerald. I looked back up at Princess Zelda, and she smiled a kind of a sad smile. "It was my mother's, but I want you to have it," she said with a hint of sadness in her voice. A blank look crossed my face as I looked back down at the bracelet. I cannot accept this," I said as I held my wrist back out at her. Princess Zelda blinked in surprise. "Nonsense. Mother would have done the same thing if she were here. Besides, I want you to have it. It looks beautiful on you. Take it. And that's in order." Impa nodded in agreement and I smiled back. "Thank you so much," I said as I hugged my friend. Satisfied with how I looked, we got my bouquet and headed towards the courtyard. The wedding was about to begin. There was a loud bustle as people tried to find their seats. Everyone in Hyrule had attended. Even all of the sages had to attend. The king would settle for no less. All of Hyrule was going to witness Link and I being wed. As the crowd began to settle down, the king came to my side. Since he was like a father to me, he was going to be the one who was giving me away to Link. I started to get nervous again as the wedding music began to play. First, the flower girl went out as she spread the flower petals along the red carpet. She looked like a little angel. I hoped that the day Link and I had children,
my own race of people,
we would have a girl as pretty as her,
which will conquer the world.
Then I watched as all my brides' maids were walked out one by one with the ushers. Next, I saw Link being walked out with Princess Zelda. He looked so handsome dressed in prince clothes. As he walked down the aisle, when he reached the altar and took his place, it was my turn to walk. Taking the king's arm, we began to walk down the aisle. As we walked, my eyes darted around the room. The nervousness rushed over me. Then my eyes landed on Link. I could see his beautiful smile. But since I was nervous, I was glad Link could not see my face from underneath my veil.
I don't care!
When we reached the altar, I took my place at Link's left. Zelda, my maid of honor, was to my left, and Darwina, Link's best man, was to his right. Before I fixed my eyes forward, I looked at Link from the corner of my eye. Man, how I loved him! Then the preacher began to speak. We have gathered here today to witness this man and woman being joined in holy matrimony. This is a special time, a holy time, when a man and a woman come together and are joined under the witness of God. May your marriage bring long life and happiness. Do you, Link, take this woman to be your wife, to love, to hold, to cherish in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Yes, I do, Link responded. And do you, Jenna, take this man to be your husband, to love, to hold, to cherish in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Yes, I do, I said softly. The rings, please. The preacher gestured for the ring bearer to bring over the rings. We were handed each other's ring and told to give each other our personal vows. Taking my left hand, Link slid the ring on my finger. With this ring, I thee wed, Link said, with passion. Then I took his left hand and slid the ring on his finger. With this ring, I thee wed, I said, as I looked deeply into his eyes. We then looked back at the preacher, and he finished the ceremony. If there is anyone who thinks this man and woman should not be joined, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace. I object! After a moment of silence, the preacher spoke again. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife! You may now kiss the bride! Gently, Link lifted up my veil, and for a moment we stared deeply into each other's eyes. Then I closed my eyes, and he gently took me into his arms and gently pressed his lips on mine. Then everyone started clapping as we made our marriage final. I felt a rush of happiness run through me. It felt warm, like the sun. As we kissed, everything was silent. Only the sound of our hearts beating together was heard. This was the happiest day of my life. Next, I gestured for all of my bridesmaids and my maid of honor to gather around me. Then I turned my back and threw the bouquet over my shoulder. Everyone reached to grab it, but it was Princess Zelda that caught it. I looked at her, and a smile crossed my rosy face as I winked. She would be the next to wed. Then I looked at Link, smiled at him, and took his arm. He led me out towards the reception hall, as everyone threw rose petals over us. The reception hall was set quite beautifully. There were flower displays, the white dove symbols interlocked with the Triforce lined the walls. There were white candles lighting the room, and a huge wedding cake sat in the center. As everyone filled into the room, Link and I went over to the cake and stood side by side behind it. The music began to play as Link and I took the knife and cut the cake. We each took a piece and fed it to each other. He missed my mouth and got some on my face. Next thing I knew, we had cake all over our faces, and I giggled as I smeared some on his nose. People laughed at the funny sight, and I smiled at Link as we started whipping the cake off our faces. There were 2 goblets sitting by the cake and a bottle of champagne next to them.
Ah, the French champagne.
Link popped the cork and poured the champagne into the goblets. He put the bottle down, and we picked up the goblets, interlocked arms, and drank from each other's cups. Everyone clapped, and then made a toast to our marriage.
May your life together bring happiness and new experiences,
Zelda said as she raised her goblet high. Hear, hear! Someone else yelled. Then the music changed into a dance, and everyone crowded onto the ballroom floor. Link led me by the hand, and the crowd formed a circle around us as we began to dance together. As I danced with Link, I felt like I was dancing on air. Felt light as a feather. I got into the music. My thoughts drifted, and I began to flow in unison with Link's body. He took the lead, and I let myself go with the flow. As I looked into his beautiful dark blue eyes, there was passion flickering in them. His eyes made me melt in his arms. As we danced together, I felt at peace. When we were done dancing, it was time for our wedding song to be played. Link had found someone to sing our wedding song. A beautiful young red-haired girl named Masson from Lon Lon Ranch was to sing for us. She got up on the platform and started to sing, "Your love floats on the wings of a dove."
On the wings of a dove, wings of a dove.
Madeleine's voice was very beautiful, and as she sang the song, it moved me. I moved close to Link and laid my head on his shoulder. He took his arm and put it around me as Masson continued to sing. The song was so moving that tears of happiness began to steam down my face. I looked deeply into Link's deep blue eyes and whispered to him that he was my everything, my world. I saw love in his eyes, in his facial expressions. He brought my face closer to his and told me that I was his one true love, his first intimately, and his world. His passion made me feel good inside, warmed my soul. I felt like the sky was the limit. And when I was with him, it felt like flying. At the end, it was time for Link and I to leave for our honeymoon. As we walked out of the castle and to the awaiting rusty brown mare, the king and Zelda had one last gift to give. Zelda walked up to me and took my hand, placed an ocarina in it, and closed my fingers around it.
I want you to have this as my gift to you both.
I looked at it and Link's face grew a surprised look.
Oh, you sure?
Link looked at her squarely.
I know that these are the keys to the door of time, but I think it would be safer with the both of you.
Zelda replied, with a reassured look in her eyes.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
I looked at Link and he knew I was confused.
This is what Ganondorf used in tricking me to open the door to the sacred realm,
Link said,
as he remembered that day. He never forgot it.
I remembered what I was told, the stories of Ganondorf. But Link and I holding the keys might be safer. Thank you. We will take good care of it, I said, as I hugged her, and she smiled. Then the king hugged me, gave Link a pat on the back and a wink. I knew what he meant by that. Ugh. Then we went to the horse that was waiting for us. Link carried me to the saddle. The horse was Epona. There was a just married sign tied to the saddle over Epona's behind. Colored strings of yarn hung from the back of the saddle and from the bottom of the sign. Link lifted me up into the saddle, then mounted in front of me. I threw my arms around his waist as he checked to see if I was ready. Then he gently booted Epona in the ribs, and we took off at a gallop. I could hear the king and Zelda saying goodbye as we rode. But soon their voices drifted into the distance. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button. It helps in some nebulous way, and please comment and subscribe. And if you really like the show, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter like all these cool people, especially Michael Fattori and Break System BSE. It's as little as $1 a month to get your name up here on this wall. The song was so moving that tears of happiness